Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
My dad came from a working class family and was paying his own way through school by working part-time at a hardware store. My uncle grew up on a farm and knew his way around tools and construction from helping his father fix equipment. Both of them could build or fix just about anything with their hands. One Tuesday morning, their structural engineering professor walked into class looking frustrated. This guy was usually calm, but today was different. The professor told everyone that he needed their help with something. For the past month, someone had been destroying his mailbox. Every single night, a red pickup truck drove by and smashed it with a baseball bat. He and his wife had replaced it 5 times already, and they were getting tired of spending money on new mailboxes. The whole class started talking. Someone in the back suggested calling the police. The professor explained that they had already tried that. The police said unless they caught the vandals in the act or had video evidence, there wasn't much they could do. So instead, he was turning this into a learning opportunity. He offered extra credit to any team that could design and build a mailbox that met city regulations and could withstand this vandalism. The budget was $20, and it had to look like a normal mailbox. My dad and uncle looked at each other and grinned. They both needed the extra credit, and this sounded like the perfect challenge. My dad asked his uncle if he was thinking what he was thinking. My uncle replied that if he meant building something that would teach these jerks a lesson, then yes, he was thinking the same thing. They spent the next few days planning. The city regulations were specific about mailbox height, size, and placement, but there was nothing in the rules about how strong the post could be. My uncle suggested using a steel pipe and filling it with concrete. My dad thought that wasn't enough. They needed rebar in there too. He wanted to make it so when the vandals hit it, they would basically be hitting a concrete pillar. They went to the hardware store where my dad worked and bought a thick steel pipe that met the height requirements. Then they got some rebar, concrete mix, and the ugliest mailbox they could find in the clearance section. The construction took them 2 weekends. First, they welded rebar inside the steel pipe and filled it with concrete. While that was curing, they prepared 8 more rebar pieces, which they welded to the outside of the pipe and bent downward. The whole thing went into a large bucket, which they filled with the heaviest rocks they could carry from the nearby creek. My uncle said the thing now weighed about 300 pounds. My dad said that was good, and suggested they paint it to look like wood. They painted the entire post brown and black, adding fake wood grain patterns. When they were done, it looked exactly like a normal wooden mailbox post. They welded the cheap mailbox to the top, making sure it couldn't be removed easily. On presentation day, they had to use a dolly to get their creation to class. The professor's eyes widened when he saw how much effort they'd put into making it look normal. The professor said it actually looked like every other mailbox on his street. He asked how much they had spent. My dad told him $18.50, explaining they got the mailbox on clearance. The professor said that was perfect, and that he would install it that night. The professor called them 2 days later, and they could hear him trying not to laugh. He told them they needed to hear what had happened. The night before, around 2 in the morning, he and his wife heard the loudest metallic bang either of them had ever heard. They looked out the window and saw that red truck speeding away with its headlights smashed. Their mailbox hadn't even budged. My dad asked what happened to the bat. The professor said it was broken in half at the base of their post. But he said the real kicker was that he had received a hospital bill in his mail that day. My uncle asked about a hospital bill, confused. The professor explained that apparently when the passenger swung that bat, the impact was so sudden and hard that he dislocated his shoulder and broke his wrist. The truck owner was threatening to sue him for the medical expenses. My dad and uncle were worried they might have gone too far, but the professor seemed pleased. He told them not to worry about it. He had hired a lawyer, and the lawyer sent the vandals a simple message. The lawyer asked if they were prepared to testify in court that they had been repeatedly vandalizing his property. The professor said he hadn't heard from them since. A week later, the professor updated the class on what had happened next. He told them that the truck owner had come by his house the day before to apologize. It turned out it was his teenage son and his friend who were doing the damage. The kid thought it was funny until he got hurt. The father paid for all the previous mailboxes and even offered to pay for a new one to replace the dangerous one they had built. My dad asked what the professor told him. The professor said he told the man that the mailbox met all city regulations and wasn't going anywhere. If he didn't want his son getting hurt, maybe he should teach him not to destroy other people's property. The professor gave my dad and uncle full extra credit, and their design became legendary around campus. Word spread about the indestructible mailbox, and vandalism in that neighborhood dropped to zero almost immediately. 3 months later, the professor told them he'd seen the red truck drive slowly past his house several times, but it never stopped. The passenger side had a dent where the headlight used to be, probably from when they hit the mailbox so hard the bat bounced back. At the end of the semester, the professor announced that several other professors had requested similar mailboxes after hearing about the success of the first one. My dad and uncle ended up building 4 more for different faculty members around town, each one getting a little more creative with the design while still looking normal. 20 years later, my dad drove by that neighborhood and swears the mailbox is still standing exactly where they installed it, looking as normal as ever. According to him, that might be the most durable thing he's ever built, and definitely the most satisfying. I had just gotten out of the Marines after serving for 12 years, did 3 tours overseas and came back home to start a civilian life. The transition wasn't easy. You go from having everything structured and disciplined to dealing with entitled civilians who think the world owes them something. I got my concealed carry permit right away because old habits die hard. And honestly, after what I'd seen overseas, I wasn't taking any chances. I was working construction at the time, trying to build up my own business. Money was tight, so when my car got damaged, it was a big deal. That old Honda was all I had to get to job sites. Anyway, I was driving down Johnson Road that afternoon. It's one of those narrow streets where you have to be careful because there's barely room for 2 cars to pass each other. When I'm coming around a bend, I see these 3 teenagers walking in the road. They're walking shoulder to shoulder, taking up the whole lane with their backs to me. I slow down and move to the far left to give them space. I'm not trying to be a jerk or anything, I just want to get past safely. When I'm passing them, I'm thinking these kids should really be walking single file or on the sidewalk. That's when everything went wrong. The second I got alongside them, they whipped out baseball bats from behind their backs and started wailing on my car. One of them took out my side mirror completely, and they put dents all along the passenger side. The whole thing lasted maybe 3 seconds, but the damage was done. I pulled over immediately. My heart was pounding, not from fear, but from pure anger. These little punks had just cost me hundreds of dollars I didn't have. I got out of the car to confront them. The oldest one, who looked about 19, started laughing and mocking me about being upset over my piece of junk car. The middle kid joined in, asking what I was going to do about it. They started walking toward me, still holding their bats. The youngest one looked nervous, but he followed the other 2. I told them they needed to pay for the damage right now, or I was calling the police. The oldest kid laughed and said I could call whoever I wanted. He said by the time police arrived, they'd be gone, and I'd just be some guy with a busted car. That's when they started charging at me with the bats raised. 3 against 1, and they thought they had me cornered. Here's where their plan fell apart. I drew my pistol and pointed it at them. I shouted for all 3 of them to stop right there and drop those bats. You should have seen their faces. They went from cocky teenagers to scared little kids in about half a second. The bats hit the ground immediately. The youngest kid started begging me not to shoot. I ordered them to get on their knees, lay face down with their arms and legs spread out. I told them to do it right now. They scrambled to comply. The oldest one was cursing under his breath, but he did what I said. I pulled out my cell phone. Not everyone had them back then, but being ex-military, I'd invested in one for emergencies. This definitely qualified. I called the police and gave them my name and location. I explained that 3 teenagers had just attacked my vehicle with baseball bats and then came at me with weapons. I told them I was armed with a legal concealed carry permit and had the attackers subdued on the ground. I said I needed an officer there immediately because I was pressing charges. The dispatcher told me that when the officer arrived, I should follow all instructions regarding my weapon. I said I understood and would comply fully with the responding officer. While we waited, the kids started their sob stories. The middle kid claimed they were just messing around and didn't mean anything by it. The youngest kid worried that his mom was going to kill him and begged me to let them go. The oldest kid had the nerve to blame me, saying this was all my fault for driving like an idiot. I didn't respond to any of it. I just kept them on the ground and waited. When the patrol car pulled up, the officer got out and immediately assessed the situation. He told me to slowly place my weapon on the ground and step back. I did exactly what he said. No sudden movements, hands visible at all times. After he secured my weapon, he looked at the scene, 3 kids on the ground, baseball bats scattered around, and my damaged car. He asked what happened, and I explained the whole thing while he examined my car and the bats. Then he talked to the kids separately. Their stories kept changing, which didn't help their case. That's when things got really interesting. While he was writing up the report, we started talking. He asked if I had served, and I told him I was a Marine for 12 years. He said he'd done 8 years himself before joining the police force. We talked for a few minutes about our service. Then he looked back at the 3 kids who were now cuffed in his patrol car. He asked me to confirm that they had come right at me with those bats. I said yes, sir. He asked if I had shot them, and I said no because they followed my commands, so I didn't see the need to escalate further. The officer shook his head and walked over to the patrol car. He opened the door so the kids could hear him. He told the 3 kids they were lucky. They had picked me and not him. He said if someone came at him with baseball bats, he would have shot all of them. He added that if I had shot them in self-defense and told him what happened, he would have sent me on my way and called it justified. The youngest kid started crying. The middle one looked like he was going to throw up. The oldest one just stared straight ahead. The officer told the 2 younger ones they better get their acts together before they ruined their lives completely. He asked the oldest one if he was 18 or older. The kid said he was 19. The officer told him he was done, that he was an adult who had just committed aggravated assault with a weapon and was going to jail. Fast forward to court day. All 3 of them had been charged as adults. Apparently, the prosecutor decided that this was serious enough to try the younger 2 as adults too. I'm sitting in the courtroom when the judge comes in. He is this older guy with gray hair and a stern expression. The bailiff calls the case, and the 3 defendants stand up with their public defenders. The judge reads through the charges and looks at the evidence photos of my car. Before proceeding, the judge said he wanted to make something clear. He explained that his son was currently serving in the Marine Corps and he had nothing but respect for our veterans. He noted that I had served our country for 12 years and was attacked by 3 individuals with weapons. He said I had shown remarkable restraint. He looked directly at the 3 kids and told them they had attacked a veteran's vehicle and then charged at him with baseball bats. He said they were fortunate I didn't exercise my right to defend myself with lethal force because I would have been completely justified. The defense attorneys tried to argue for lighter sentences, claiming the kids were young and made a mistake. The judge wasn't having it. He said this wasn't a mistake but a coordinated attack designed to damage property and potentially harm an innocent person. He pointed out that I could have been killed if I hadn't been armed and trained to handle the situation. In the end, all 3 got the maximum sentence our state allowed for aggravated assault with a weapon, 2 years for the younger ones and 5 years for the oldest, since he had a prior record I didn't know about. Their parents had to pay restitution for my car repairs plus court costs. I was dirt poor in a small town in the 90s, but I had one thing that made it all bearable. My 1984 Jeep CG7. I bought it with every penny I'd saved from odd jobs around town, and it was beat up and rusty, but it was mine. That Jeep represented everything to me. Freedom, independence, and hope for something better. I was 17 and working the midnight shift at Pete's gas station, the only 24-hour place in our tiny town. The pay was terrible, but it kept gas in my tank and food on my family's table. My dad had been laid off from the factory 6 months earlier, and my mom was working double shifts at the diner just to keep the lights on. The Jeep had its quirks. The biggest one was that the gas gauge was completely busted. It always showed empty no matter how much fuel was actually in the tank. I gotten used to tracking my mileage and filling up based on that instead of trusting the needle. It was a quiet Thursday night when my younger brother came by the station around 10 p.m. He was nervous, fidgeting with his wallet and checking his watch every few seconds. He asked if he could borrow the Jeep for the night because he had a date with a girl from school and there was a party everyone was going to. I asked him if he had his license, and he assured me he did. He was practically begging, saying this was really important to him. I could see how much this meant to him. He'd been talking about this girl for weeks, and I remembered what it was like being his age and wanting to impress someone. I told him he could take it, but to be careful, and not to leave the keys in it like last time. He promised he wouldn't, and thanked me. He grabbed the keys and practically bounced out of the station. I watched my Jeep disappear down Main Street and went back to restocking the coolers and cleaning the pumps. Around 1 a.m. my phone rang. The caller ID showed my brother's number, and I immediately knew something was wrong by the way it was ringing. Frantic, like he was hitting redial over and over. When I answered, I asked what was wrong. He started apologizing over and over, saying he had messed up really bad. I told him to just explain what happened. He said they went to the party and he was talking to some people outside. He had left the keys in the Jeep for just a few minutes while he helped carry some stuff inside, and when he came back out, it was gone. My heart dropped into my stomach. I gripped the phone so tight my knuckles turned white. I asked if he was sure he didn't just park it somewhere else. He said no, that he had looked everywhere and someone had definitely taken it. He told me he had already called the police, but they said since it was such a small town, there wasn't much they could do that night. I felt like I was going to be sick. That Jeep wasn't just transportation. It was my lifeline, my hope, everything I'd worked for. I asked where he was, and he said he was still at the party because he had gotten a ride but didn't want to come home without talking to me first. I told him to stay put and that I would figure something out. I hung up and stared at the empty parking lot. 20 minutes later, I saw headlights pulling up to the pumps. My jaw dropped. It was my Jeep. Two guys got out laughing and shoving each other like they didn't have a care in the world. They looked to be in their early 20s, wearing dirty clothes and reeking of beer, even from where I stood behind the counter. The first guy told me to fill it up with regular gas. The second guy said the Jeep was a piece of junk, but it ran well. The first guy agreed and said it was just sitting there with the keys, practically begging to be taken. They were talking about my Jeep like it was some kind of joke. My hands were shaking when I reached under the counter and pressed the silent alarm button that connected directly to the police station. I walked outside trying to keep my voice steady. I greeted them politely and said I would get the gas filled up for them. The second guy thanked me and mentioned that the gas gauge was busted because it showed empty, but they had been driving around for hours. I agreed and said these old Jeeps sometimes had problems like that. When I started pumping gas, I could see the keys hanging in the ignition. My heart was pounding so loud I was sure they could hear it, but I forced myself to stay calm. I had worked at this station for months, and I knew exactly how long it took to fill up different vehicles. A Jeep this size would take about 8 minutes to fill from empty. The first guy asked how much longer it would take because they wanted to get out of there. I told him just a few more minutes and asked if they were from around the area. The second guy said no, that they were just passing through. He said they had found this ride tonight and figured they would take it for a spin. They were actually bragging about stealing my Jeep to my face. I wanted to punch them both, but I knew I had to be smart about this. The pump clicked off, showing they owed $32. Both guys headed toward the station to pay, leaving my Jeep unattended. This was my chance. I quickly unscrewed the gas cap and let it drop to the ground with a loud clang, then bent down to pick it up. While I was down there, I reached through the open window and slipped the keys out of the ignition, sliding them into my pocket in one smooth motion. The first guy asked what the noise was. I told him I had just dropped the gas cap, but it was no big deal. They paid for the gas and walked back to my Jeep, still joking around. I watched from the doorway when the first guy got in and reached for where the keys should have been. The first guy asked where the keys were. The second guy seemed confused and asked what he meant, saying they should be right there in the ignition. The first guy insisted they weren't there and asked if his friend had taken them. The second guy asked why he would take them and told him to check his pockets. The first guy said he didn't have them and that his friend must have grabbed them when they went inside to pay. The second guy insisted he didn't have any keys. They started getting louder, accusing each other and searching through the Jeep frantically. I could hear sirens in the distance getting closer. The first guy said this was insane and that the keys had been right there. The second guy suggested maybe they had fallen out somewhere. The first guy shouted that keys don't just disappear. The police cars pulled into the station with lights flashing. 2 officers got out and approached the guys who were still arguing by my Jeep. One officer greeted them politely and said they had gotten a call about suspicious activity. The second guy told the officer that this was their vehicle, but somehow the keys had just vanished. The first guy agreed, saying they had stopped for gas and now couldn't find their keys anywhere. I walked over to the officers, pulling the keys from my pocket. I told them these were my keys to my Jeep and that these 2 men had stolen it from a party tonight. The officer asked if I could prove this was my vehicle. I said yes and told him the registration was in the glove box under my name. I also said I could tell them all about the Jeep's problems that only the owner would know. I opened the glove box and handed over the registration, then explained about the broken gas gauge and a dozen other quirks that proved the Jeep was mine. The first guy said this was crazy and asked how they knew I wasn't lying. The officer told him that the fact that I had the keys and the registration pretty much settled it. The second guy protested that they had been driving the thing all night and it was just sitting there. The officer asked if it was sitting there with the keys in it. The second guy said yes, but started to realize his mistake. The officer asked if he was admitting to taking a vehicle that didn't belong to him. The guys looked at each other, realizing they had just confessed. The officers started chuckling at the situation. One officer said he wanted to get this straight. They had stolen my Jeep, then brought it to the gas station where I worked, and I had stolen the keys back while they were paying for gas. I confirmed that was exactly what had happened. The second officer was grinning and shaking his head. He said that in 20 years of police work, he had never seen anything like this. He mentioned that Dispatch was going to love this story. They handcuffed both guys and put them in the back of the patrol car. When they were driving away, I could see the thieves staring back at me through the rear window, still looking confused about how their night had gone so wrong. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.